Hello, welcome to another video for the ContDataQC package in R. This video is on custom configuration. The ContDataQC is a package and add-in for R statistical programming language. Enables users to perform some quality control checks and related functions on their continuous monitoring data. The code's going to be the videos, the code that I'm going to show are available on GitHub, which is a code sharing website. The link is there. To install the package within R, run the code below, library dev tools, and then install GitHub. The force equals true says to always add whatever data is on the web and overwrite. The build vignettes true says to always install the and create the vignettes. The vignettes are just an overall help file. Getting help from within R, make sure you always load the library first. To get help on a specific function, just prefix with the question mark. These are all from the R console. Help index of all the functions in the package, code is there, and then to load the vignette. The vignette will come up within, if you're using RStudio, within the help window, but you can in the viewer. But you can always get it to pop up inside a web browser. If you're not using RStudio, it will just come up in your web browser. Custom configuration. So the ContDataQC package contains a configuration file that holds the thresholds, formats, directory names, parameter names used in the internal workings of the package. All these are parameterized so that they can be changed inside the configuration file. So you're allowed to load up your own configuration file which overrides the defaults. The way this is done is it always loads the default, and then any that you add, it overwrites, so you only ever have to include the one or two things that you need. Examples include time zones. The working group is Eastern, so the time zone is set to USA, New York Eastern. Say the thresholds for flagging suspect and fail measurements, inclusion of values flagged as QC failures in calculations. By default, any value that gets flagged as a failure overall, that value will get thrown out when doing calculations. Viewing the configuration file, it's included in the vignette. There's a command to launch the vignette. You can also go directly to this web link for online, and it'll pull up the configuration file. You can also open it up. I'll show them some code later to just open it right up inside R. As you look through the file, any line that is prefixed with the # is a comment. Generally try to include delimiters in between each section, so it's a little bit easier to see. As you can see here, there's a screenshot of the code of the trigger for whether to include or exclude failures, and then the default file format. So those are different things, so put in a separator in between them to make it a little bit more human readable. Creating a custom file, config files, you only need to include the lines for values that you want to be different. As I said, the package loads the default configuration first, and then overwrites any variables that wind up being the same. So if you need to change to time zone, say you want to change to Central Time Zone, that value is my TZ. So you might want to change it to American Chicago to get to the Central Time Zone. To change the exclusion of QC failures, it's mystats.fails.exclude, so you would make that false. Example, to change flatline test for thresholds for water temperature, open and save the configuration file to your working directory, change the relevant values. Say 3020.01, you might want to change them to 5030 and leave the 0.01. Recommend you just delete out all other lines in the code to make it easier to find. The configuration file is rather long, so just delete out everything else. But then add in comments of who you are, when you made the change, and just a short description of why. That way it could be these are wintertime or mountain streams, so I want different thresholds. And then you just include the new configuration file in your function calls. Changing the values, so say if you're getting too many failures during winter months, you might want to change the number of consecutive measurements that trigger a suspect low or failure the high measurement. You could also change the minimum difference. In this example, I'm going to change the 30 and 20 to 50 and 30. So I'm going to get the file and then rename configuration.mod.r to configuration_flat.r. So it has a name that a little bit more descriptive of what and why is included in the file. The code changes, so before modification I open up the file, I come down to lines 366 that I have highlighted there, and you can see I changed those values from 30 and 20 to 50 and 30, left the 0.01 alone, but then I also deleted out everything else, so this code is now 6 lines long, 4 of which happen to be comments of my name or contact, date, and why I made the change and what I changed it from. So to include the custom configuration file when you run, there is a parameter fun.myconfig that typically you leave it blank and it uses the defaults, but if you change it to a file name that's in the working directory, or if you include the full path to the file, it'll pull it in. Here's the R code from the help file, is saying we're running in QC raw, so that's the code as is in the help file. If I wanted to use my custom configuration file, what I have highlighted there in yellow is what I would add. I'm going to run some live code right here, and I have everything saved in our notebook, which is a mashup of text and code. And this will be saved with the slides and the videos on GitHub. So here's our studio. This is my code window on the left. This is the notebook. This won't be on there, but when I hit the preview button, in the viewer comes up the HTML file. And I can also open this up in a separate web browser if I wanted. So here's the table of contents. I'm just going to step through the code, and you can just copy this code out and paste it into your window, your console, and you can copy it right here, each one of these gray chunks, or I can also copy it from my left hand side. So I might switch back and forth, just the way the windows work. So here's a piece of code that copies a blank, not a blank, but the default configuration file and renames it to mod. And it shows up inside of our file window right here, where it wasn't there before. And what that lets me do is it copies it in. Now I can have access to it. I don't have to go searching for it inside the package directory. What I want to modify is lines 366 and 367, so I'm actually going to open that file up. There's a little bit of lag there, sorry, there's network traffic. Lines 366, 67, since I know where it is, and this is the one for water temperature. I'm just going to delete out everything else and say example flat line from 320 to 5030. Date and my name. This way somebody can always come back to you and you can maybe look in your notes and say, oh, this is why I made the change, this is what I happened to be working on that day. And I'm just going to do a save as. So now I've made the change. I could have also called this code just here to open up. I'll just run that so that you can see it. So that opens up the file, which I already opened by clicking on it. Just for comparison, I could run the code before and then run it after. I'm just going to run the after for right now. So that you can see here, my config.flat or _flat, and that's going to be in my code. So as the code works through and runs, we don't need to wait for it to finish. Back to my slides. Want to acknowledge our work was funded by US EPA ORD and CIA, or Project Manager for the Beer Wagon. I'm Eric Leppo. I helped out with Jen Stamp, also Tetra Tech, and David Gibbs, who works for Brita at EPA. Thank you very much.